picked up this journal. It's called Wreck This Journal, and each page offers instructions on how to do exactly that. I brought along a few of the wrecked pages and put them on the altar, as well as what's left of the journal itself. At first, the whole notion of it just seemed silly, but as I looked at it and explored it and, well, wrecked it, I discovered that I was having a profound creative experience. This got me to thinking about the relationship between destruction and creation, and ultimately led to the morning worship service you see before you today. I've become fascinated with some of the belief structures in the Hindu religion. The Hindu folks totally get it about creation and destruction. They even have deities especially for these concepts. Shiva, also called the Destroyer, is the most powerful god in the Hindu pantheon. Why? Well, I'm not sure. But it may be because destruction is something that often seems enormous and inscrutable, something humans cannot fully comprehend and certainly cannot control. If people pray to gods as a way of preventing or avoiding things they fear, it would make some sense to pray to a god of destruction. Or maybe it's because destruction is the ultimate act of creation. Hindus believe in reincarnation, so death for them causes new life. Hindus also believe in karma, including the idea that by doing well in your current life, you will earn a better station in your next life. We learned a little bit about that in the Story for All Ages. So basically, as the Hindus see it, you'll die whether you live your life well or poorly. Destruction is inevitable. But if you have lived a good life, destruction becomes a gift, being only an intermediate step in your recreation to a better life. Imagining destruction as little more than a waypoint on the road to something better certainly helps to soften the sharp edges of mortality. Yet it's hard to believe that the Hindu people, any more than any other people, can really face destruction without fear, even the kind of destruction that serves a creative purpose. Destruction is scary because it's a devil you know. Even if you don't know what happens to your soul after you die, you have a pretty good idea what happens to your body, and it ain't pretty. The devastation created by disease, fire, flood, and the like is similarly terrifying, and in some sense, similarly predictable. You may not like it, but you do have a basic understanding of how fires and floods work and what's going to happen if they occur. Creation, on the other hand, is scary because it's a devil you don't know. You know that something will be fundamentally different as a result of the creative act, but you don't necessarily know what or how. By definition, a thing that is created hasn't existed before, so there's risk in creating, and that risk is in some sense inscrutable. Did you ever think about buying a really expensive cut of meat or an exotic spice, but decided against it for fear of messing up the recipe and wasting the money? Or maybe you thought about taking a drawing class, but you were afraid you'd be bad at it and people would laugh at you. Maybe you really want to sing louder than you do, but robustitude be damned, you're afraid of hitting a wrong note. The fear of destruction, of wrecking the journal, can prevent us from ever turning the page. There's an old saying, show me someone who's never made a mistake, and I'll show you someone who's never made anything. It's a really important, really true statement. If we want to create anything, the first thing we need to make is, well, a mess. Or at least a mistake. Even the greatest creative geniuses in history were bad at their craft before they were good at it. Show me someone who's never made a mistake, and I'll show you someone who's never made anything. The funny thing about this so-called quote, I went looking for the origin of it. It's a remix of a bunch of things other people have said. It can't be ascribed to any one person. It's the product of someone, or several someones, deciding that whatever the original quote might have been, while useful in concept, maybe wasn't quite as poetic as it could have been. So they changed a few of the words, and evidently chose not to take credit for the retooled version, maybe because the prior art was too similar for it to really constitute a new idea. And that leads to an interesting question. Are there any new ideas? The law of conservation of matter says we already have all the stuff we're ever going to have, so all we can do is change its form. All the music in the world can only be comprised of the same 12 notes. The American form of government, as conceived by its founding fathers, was a pretty radical concept. But that was more than 225 years ago, and we haven't come up with any real new ways of doing it since then. Even that radical innovation of government wasn't completely unheard of. It wasn't that nobody prior to 1776 had ever considered the idea that all men are created equal, or that they had a right to life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness. It was just that nobody had ever thought to build a national government based on those precepts. The innovation was applying a self-evident idea in a new context. So when we think about creativity or innovation, really what we've got is a lot of pieces of ideas, pieces of the truth, most, if not all of which, have existed for longer than we have. And our process of creation can't generate something out of nothing unless we figure out a way to stick it to thermodynamics, and I don't really see that happening anytime soon. That means that in order to make something new, we have to take some existing old stuff and change it. It is as simple and as difficult and as destructive as that. To make an omelet, we have to break eggs. Arguably, the most frequently used and critical tool in the chef's kitchen is that big, scary knife. Everything from the soup to the nuts involves some form of dismantling the ingredients. To make a garment, we have to cut fabric, brutalize it with thousands of needle pokes, creasing it with a hot iron and molding it to our will. To build machinery involves acts of unthinkable torture being perpetrated against a wide array of raw materials. And boy, howdy, don't get me started about recycling. So by necessity, the process of creation is also a process of destruction. The process of creation is also a process of destruction. If we want something new to come into our lives, we have to let something old go. Nature shows us how to do this, right? Seeds germinate, they grow into plants, produce flowers or fruit that get eaten by animals, which then poop seeds into other places. And the poop and the decaying remains of other plants and animals that have died makes a nutrient-rich base for those seeds to germinate, and the whole thing starts all over again. There's nothing new, even though there are plants that weren't there before, and animals and people being born, and whole cities being built from the trees and the dirt and the rainwater and the liquefied carcasses of dinosaurs. Even light itself comes from something burning. There's nothing new. And yet there is, isn't there? T.S. Eliot said, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." Newness, then, is not about the things we see and destroy and recreate, but rather it is about ourselves and our acts of seeing and destroying and recreating them. When we see something we have not seen before, or do something we have not done before, we become the thing that is new. Our own discoveries and revelations defy thermodynamics. They are a thing that has never existed before this moment, and now does. And maybe that's why it's scary. To create is to face the possibility of a different and unknown you, something brand new in the world, the ultimate mystery. We also defy physics, at least at the personal level, by letting go of that which no longer serves us. Removing such things from our lives effectively causes them to cease to exist. The thing itself, the troubling event or the no longer needed item, the object or feeling or belief that no longer serves us, still exists in the world. Choosing to let a thing go does not mean it never existed or never happened. But for each of us as individuals, choosing to let that thing go can make it disappear enough that it doesn't really matter. When we let it go, its existence takes a different form for us, and the new form is one that is either unrecognizable to its prior form, like the dissipating heat and light of the papers in the burning bowl, or effectively irrelevant, like that pair of polyester pants you donated to Goodwill, never, we hope, to be seen again. And what are the things we don't want to keep, and yet don't entirely want to let go? Those last few years of your uncle's life when he suffered from dementia and became bitter, mean, and unpredictable may be high on your list of things you want out of your mind. But those lovely fishing trips you took with him every summer as a kid, those are rare treasures in the attic trunk of your memory. So to make the omelet of happy memories, you may need to break the egg of your uncle's life, holding on to the nourishing center and letting the sharp shells go. Wow, was that taking the metaphor too far? The process of creation is also a process of destruction. Most of our conscious energy, all our lives, is spent on making meaning. We collect information, first from colors and shapes and sounds and smells, and then from words, and over time from books, music, art, food, and nature. We fit new pieces of input into a grand puzzle in our heads, and in the process, the input gets torn apart and put back together in whatever way we need to make it fit. A phrase of music reminds a listener of another song, or evokes a memory of a time or a place. The phrase is lifted from its song and moved to a new address in his memory. A fluently bilingual person speaking one language suddenly switches to the other because the exact word she needs in that moment only exists in the second one. We spend our entire lives dismantling, rearranging, and reconstructing an infinitely complex web of experiences, all the while hoping to make some sense of it, perhaps succeeding, perhaps not. And whether our acts of creation have been simply making meaning or making something more concrete, we fear the destructive aspects of the creative process and hope that somehow, when the columns are totaled, we did more good than harm, or at least kept the worst ravages of entropy at bay. In the context of our constant battle with entropy and our fearful resistance to change, it turns out that having permission to wreck something is empowering. The first page of Wreck This Journal urges the owner to crack the spine. To do this to a brand new book is unsettling, yet also somehow liberating and kind of fun in a cackle evilly while committing an act of willful property damage sort of way. It also provides a microcosm of an answer to a positively epic question. What would you do if you knew you could not fail? What if you could try something new without fear of doing it wrong? What if you could let go of all the judgment and editing and censorship you automatically apply to your every word and deed all day long, and just draw or write or paint or sculpt or build or sing or play whatever happened to come out? What if making a mistake or a mess was the point? When you break eggs, you always risk getting little pieces of shell in the bowl, or piercing the yolk, or making some other sort of mess. You also unleash the possibility of a perfect sunny side up, a hearty omelet, a rich gooey brownie, or an exquisite airy souffle. How might this afternoon, or tomorrow, or next year be different if you fully embraced all that possibility and stopped wasting energy worrying about that risk? What if you started your creative journey by cracking the spine of your storybook? What if you rushed in and made the inevitable mistakes without hesitation so you could have them out of the way and get on with the process of realizing your full creative brilliance? The process of creation is also a process of destruction. Often what we destroy is nothing we would lament being rid of. What would you do if you knew you could